Identity and postmodernism in City of Glass. Identity plays a big role in the novel City of Glass, especially for the main character, Daniel Quinn. When Quinn decides to stop writing poetry, as a consequence of the death of his wife and son, he adopts a new identity for the first time, publishing his detective novels under the pseudonym of William Wilson. This can be seen as the first step in his process of creating self-identity, which eventually causes him to lose track of himself. However, when Quinn creates William Wilson, he moves away from himself as Daniel Quinn. Quote page 4. He had, of course, long ago stopped thinking of himself as real. Quinn no longer sees himself as real because of his fictional character Daniel Quinn, who's dominating. Quinn lives through the fictional world of his books, and the lines between fiction and reality becomes blurred, just like the identity of Quinn. In addition to William Wilson, there's another fictional character playing a significant role in the discussion of Quinn's identity. This is Max Work, the detective of Wilson or Quinn's novels. There are incidents in the City of Glass, or City of Glass of course, where Quinn identifies himself as this fictional character of Work. Max Work symbolizes the next step of evasion. Quinn subconsciously tries to escape from reality. He attempts to suppress his feeling by creating a world of his own, where he slips into a role of other characters without even noticing anymore. Quote page 4. It was then that he had taken on the name of William Wilson. Quinn was no longer a part of him that could write books, and although in many ways Quinn continued to exist, he no longer existed for anyone but himself. There's also Paul Auster, the writer in the novel, and of course Paul Auster, the author of City of Glass, who exists in our real world. Paul Auster, the author of City of Glass, takes this metafictional identity game even further when Paul Auster, the writer in the novel, states in the novel that he's writing an article about different identity of the narrator of Cervantes' Don Quixote. Once again, this is a great example of metafiction in City of Glass. Metafiction involves several layers of reality and identity. Several layers of identity can not only be found when looking at the character of Quinn, but also when it comes to Peter Stillman. Peter Stillman Jr., of course, constantly states, quote, "My name is Peter Stillman, that's not my real name." However, there exists another Peter Stillman in the novel, namely Peter Stillman Sr., Peter Stillman Jr.'s father. Furthermore, Quinn's dead son is also called Peter. In fact, the writer Paul Auster and the narrator decides to look for Quinn in Stillman's apartment. This is a good example of metafiction. It clearly indicates the fact that the focus is now on the narrator's view of the story. And now I'm gonna talk a little about postmodern society in general. Personal history, social class, gender, culture, and religion individually shapes truth and reality. This is one of the main ideas of postmodern society. Postmodern society is characterized by an intense development and globalization. It's a product of a disintegrated world, which is difficult to define. However, there are some characteristics that form the postmodern society. Usually the postmodern society is stated from 1970 till now or even further. One of the main keywords for the postmodern society is individualism. The individual is no longer formed by a certain group of society. Instead, each individual shapes itself. However, this opportunity can be a burden for some who finds it difficult to navigate in this changeable world. The sociologist Anthony Giddens defines the postmodern society by three dynamics. First, time and space separation. Second, disembedding mechanism. And third, the reflexive character of modernity. The last mention especially has a great relevance for the conflict of the City of Glass. The reflective character of the postmodern society is defined by a constant use of information and knowledge. The traditional society was defined by a definitive truth, but in the postmodern society has been detraditionalized, and the individual can no longer depend on the definitive truth, but has to create its own views of life. And how postmodern society is seen in the City of Glass. First off, the individualism. Postmodern society is clearly seen in Paul Auster's detective novel City of Glass. Quinn is a product of the time. He is a great example and portrays individualism. Quinn is a writer and he takes on many identities, as mentioned earlier, both as an author and as characters in his books. He states that he is certain of who he is, but throughout the novel there is a pattern of doubting and questioning his identity. Quote page 40. And then, most important of all, to remember who I am, to remember who I'm supposed to be. I do not think this is a game. On the other hand, nothing is clear. For example, who are you? And if you think you know, why do you keep lying about it? I have no answer. All I can say is this: listen to me. My name is Paul Auster. That's not my real name. It seems that Daniel Quinn believes that he knows his own true identity, but at the same time he's convincing himself to be someone else. This individualism is also seen in Quinn's way of living. He tends to isolate himself from the surrounding world and his friends. He has decided not to be a part of any social group, which is an effect of the individualism in postmodern society. Another important keyword of the postmodern society is high reflexivity. The society sets up an expectation for the individual to reflect on everything. You cannot just accept the facts, but need to wonder why and how. Everything you do and see needs to be rationalized. Daniel Quinn is a typical example of this development of society. He's very reflected in everything around the case in City of Glass. He has a little red notebook wherein he writes and questions everything. He wonders about every detail of his notes concerning Peter Stillman Sr. A great example of the high reflexivity of Quinn is when he discovers that Stillman Sr.'s walking path spells out a new letter every day, which end out spelling the Tower of Babel. Both identity and postmodern society are very important parts of the City of Glass. Identity is one of the main themes and focuses of the novel, whereas postmodern society is present in Auster's way of portraying life and the characters.